recording rolling, and we'll get it going. All right. So welcome everybody to week 3 here at BSBA. I'm your president, Colin Flintoft. We're very excited to have you tonight, and we think it's a very special opportunity to get to hear from one of UCLA's best, Mr. Jay Tucker himself. Welcome, Jay.
Thanks for having me. I don't know if I'm one of UCLA's best. We got legends like John Wooden, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jackie Robinson, but hey, I'm just happy to be one of our alums and one of the folks that gets to do some cool things on campus now, back in the role that I'm in.
Absolutely. Yeah, very humble. You're up there. We appreciate it, though. Thanks for joining.
All right. My pleasure.
So looking real quick at what tonight's going to look like, I'm going to introduce our esteemed guest and a little more about his background, and then hand it over to Jay. He's going to share a little more about his path to success, and then we'll lead a little bit of a discussion featuring our executive board. You guys kind of know the drill at this point, and then towards the end, we'll allow for a little over 15 minutes or so of just open audience question and answer directly with Jay himself. I'll moderate during that time, and we just ask that you guys please use the raise hand function, or at any time throughout the meeting, if something comes up on your mind, feel free to just throw it in the chat, and we'll try and address it as quick as we can. And at the very end, after we say goodbye to Jay, we'll just go over what our next play is looking like, as well as some other announcements, including the Pulse Conference, which we can talk about a little more in a little bit, but we're definitely excited for that. So who is Jay? So Jay is currently the executive director at the Center for Media, Entertainment, and Sports at the UCLA Anderson School of Management. And for those of you who maybe aren't familiar, that's our business school here for graduate students. Jay received an MBA from there himself. He also got a Master of Arts in instructional and learning technologies from Columbia University over in the Ivy League in New York City. And he also holds dual bachelor's degrees from Stanford University in political science and African and Afro-American studies. Some of his other experiences include being a former marketing recruiter at Microsoft, and also being a program advisor for the Digital Diversity Network. And also, although it was over at our rivals, still a really cool venture. He founded Silicon Beach over at USC, which is a 2-day event featuring a venture competition, as well as a conference that's focused on innovation, investment, and new ventures related to anything in those spaces. So very, very cool stuff. And I guess now with that resume in mind, Jay, would you mind sharing a little more about yourself, your career, and how you got to where you're at today?
Sure. So first of all, welcome everybody. Feel free to turn on your cameras if you like, so I can see your faces. No obligation, especially if you're in a place where you can't really show your faces. But I'd like to see them if you can show them. So I am on career number 4, I think, at this point. I'm somebody who's generally just a curious person. I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Queens, New York. I don't know if I got any other people out there representing Queens, Peter Parker, Anthony Mason, Tribe Called Quest, Run DMC. But that's where I'm from. My dad was a police officer. My mom was a secretary. I went to public schools just about my whole young life. But wanted to be, I was a big math and science nerd. But I wanted to go to school as far away from home as possible. So I went to Stanford undergrad. Had there been a good school in Hawaii or in the Marshall Islands or something like that, I probably would have gone off that way too. But while I was in school, for me as an undergrad, like I said, I'm just a curious person. I thought I was going to be an engineer, but instead I really got much more interested in American history, the functionings of our government, the ways in which our institutions have benefited and sometimes marginalized different groups of people. And so that was really my area of focus academically. And I tried, while I was in school as an undergrad, just to kind of get my fingers into anything I possibly could, and to try to really help other folks achieve their visions, right? So in the same way, I'm just so happy to see this group, because I feel like this is an example of the kind of leadership we have at UCLA. I tried to do similar things. I was an orientation volunteer, an RA at one point. I worked actually intramural sports. I was a very bad basketball official, decent football and softball, but basketball, even though I was willing to run, I just didn't know the rules well enough. So, I was the guy where, about halfway through the game, the guys were fighting with each other because I didn't call enough fouls. Anyway, but I, did all that stuff. I ran for student body president at the time, which is a story for another day. My slate and I, we won. I got to serve. In fact, one of my slate mates is a guy named Goodwin Liu, who sits on the California Supreme Court now. So, it was good times, right? Had a great, great time and was not at all thinking about technology until after I graduated. And one of my best friends at school took a job at Microsoft. Now, you have to understand, this was in the early 90s. So this was before a little thing called Windows. Just before. There had been previous versions of Windows. In fact, this was, when I got interviewed for my job, Windows 3.0 was out, which was the first one that people kind of used, but it wasn't great. And not long after I started, Microsoft launched Windows 3.1. And so while I was there, I got the tech bug. Again, I was big into tech as a kid, but in college, I just kind of said, I want to know more about people. But the thing about Windows, which is obvious to you guys now, especially with the mobile revolution, it was the first time really that it was obvious that tech and people were going to come together. That tech was actually going to have practical applications for the way people learned and lived and played and all this other stuff. Up until that point, doing things with PCs other than, composing a document or using spreadsheets or whatever was really, you had to program. You had to be a software developer to do anything useful. But very rapidly, from say 92 to about 95, 96, that all flipped. In fact, at that time, when we started to see an explosion of even PC games, right? Consumer software, CD-ROMs, which is, again, CD-ROMs probably before your time. Microsoft had its own encyclopedia. It also had CD-ROM titles, that covered baseball and other things, right? Microsoft's encyclopedia product was called Encarta. And later on, they would ship a thing called Encarta Africana, which was, this incredible resource, digital resource for Black history. So when I was there, the thing, I was stoked to be part of this technology revolution, but my biggest concern was that these wheels of progress were going to roll over people from marginalized communities who just didn't understand that this shift was going to change the way we did everything. Because I was seeing a world where you could get gainfully employed just having a familiarity and interest in computer applications, PC applications, without having the ability to be a developer or anything. But just like, I can mess around with a word processor and I think computers are cool, would get you in the door. And in a lot of places across the country, people just didn't care and didn't understand that. So I left Microsoft. I got a master's degree in basically in technology and education. Nowadays, I think what I studied, you would probably call it UX design, user experience design, because it was really about kind of cognitive psychology, how people learn, how people use interfaces, and how to create tech that that people can use.
Yeah.
Right. And then I went on to be a technology director for about 12 years at a small school in New York City. Right. I went back home basically, and I spent about 12 years back in New York. Good times. The Mets, went to a World Series during that time. And it's been kind of slim picking since, but we won't talk about that. But I, while I was there, as much positive impact as I could make on the tech side, it paled in comparison to the role of pop culture and media. And I just felt like that was something I wanted to get into, which is what drove me to come to UCLA Anderson, which we can talk about the benefits of being at UCLA if you're looking for a career in sports or entertainment. But I really felt like, particularly if I was going to go back and get an MBA and find a way to be useful on the business side, I needed to understand how the entertainment business actually functioned. And more to the point, like, what were some of the mechanics that actually got people interested in new ventures and new initiatives, and how you brought consumers kind of onto the same page with you to be able to launch things they hadn't seen before. So my big areas of focus when I was here at UCLA getting my MBA were really marketing and entrepreneurship, right? And I had a chance to do a lot of fun things when I was here at UCLA, but two drawbacks. One was of my choosing, one was not. The first is that I came and did the full-time MBA program about 10 years later than you should. That is to say that after my 4 years at Microsoft, that was probably the time to go get an MBA. And instead I went and got a master's degree in education. And 12 years later, you don't get a full-time MBA. You might get an executive MBA, but you don't, drop everything, go to school full-time. Although that was the experience I wanted, and I don't regret it at all because I got to do lots of fun things when I was here. But, for you guys, think 3 to 7 years before you go to get your MBA, not 15, right? That's not the game. That's not what you do. But the second thing is that, when I went into business school, it seemed like the perfect opportunity, especially for somebody like me who, was good with people, had a technology background, had messed around with a couple of entrepreneurial ventures, had worked, done side work as a web designer and other things, right? Like that was the time to get your MBA because everybody was, businesses were blowing up and all this other stuff. The end of my first year, or rather the kind of just before the start of my second year of a 2-year MBA program was when the housing crisis and the economic meltdown happened. So imagine leaving gainful employment, not getting paid for a year and spending money on going to school, moving from New York to LA, and then to be faced with a situation where, it's not looking too good for MBAs right now. And so I was super, super lucky in the sense that I had a professor here at Anderson who introduced me to this incredible woman who had spent about 17 years at Fox, and she had actually launched text message voting on American Idol. She had launched Mobisodes, so web episodes that you could view on your mobile device for the TV show 24, which would cover like the kind of minute between the end of an episode and the start of the next one, and a bunch of other innovations where she worked in partnership with big telecom companies like AT&T and Verizon, with big tech companies, and with Fox Studios to kind of create these new experiences that were really the birth of digital. And so she was taking over a center at USC that was focused basically on tech and the future of entertainment. And so because of the introduction, I started to kind of advise her, but that turned into a contract position, which turned into a full-time position, which turned into me running that center for a while and launching Silicon Beach at USC and meeting a ton of people in the entertainment space and leveraging basically everything I had learned and all these other experiences to kind of launch new stuff while I was at USC. And about 8 years later, I got the chance to come back here, which, there's so many reasons, great reasons to want to come back to Anderson, not the least of which is that I love my alma mater and was just pleased to be able to be back on campus. But also because, my time at USC had given me a glimpse into how technology was rapidly transforming the entertainment space specifically. And so my interest was in all the various ways that the entertainment business was transforming, not so much specifically like what was happening with AT&T or Comcast or Technicolor, but really more what was happening with television network streaming services and other entertainment entities, sports franchises, wired stadiums, and so on. So I got a chance to come to a place where that really was the focus, and also where there was an established set of classes and programs for students, because in my previous role, most of the work I did was kind of corporate facing and external facing. And this was a chance to actually step into a role where I could spend more time with people like you. So I've been here for the last 5 years. It's been wonderful. We've been able to do some cool stuff. Our Pulse conference is something that I think a lot of people really enjoy, but we've also launched a partnership with Real Madrid to do leadership development programs with them. We've done workshops for like the NBA's Retired Players Association. We've collaborated with film distributors, right, to do special programming. We're working on a partnership now with the Rose Bowl through their Rose Bowl Institute. It's just been a blast. And so, like I said, I'm really excited to be here at the center where we do, we've got classes for MBAs. We have courses for undergraduates that we run in the summer. We've got our partnerships. We've got our conferences. We have partnerships with some folks in the industry. And I get to be in the middle of all of that. And it's great, but not the least of which is the chance to kind of spend time with you guys and hopefully help you guys get started in your careers.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing all that. Plenty of things to go off of right there for sure. I guess starting maybe with some more personal characteristics and qualities and how you became a successful professional and things like that. While doing, some research about you, we saw that you are a pretty dynamic storyteller, relentless problem solver, and unrepentant optimist. We were curious if you could expand a little more on those qualities and how they manifest in your life and how you develop them.
So I grew up in the crack era in New York City. You got to be an optimist if you want to be successful. But I will tell you that my time at Microsoft at the time that I was there really helped me become a professional. I was in my early 20s and representing the company, around the country and sometimes even overseas. And in many instances, people were like, sir, like I would show up to the place where I was supposed to be presenting or doing whatever. Folks say, sir, that's where the Microsoft representative is supposed to go. You can't go back there. It's like, ma'am, I am the Microsoft representative. But yeah. Son, you're so young. It's like, but that was what it was like at the time. And the religion we had on my team was that, we were always looking for people who were smart, who worked hard and who got things done. That at the end of the day, it wasn't about like where you were, it was about what you accomplished when you were there. And I think a lot of my desire to kind of empower people and to drive positive results really gave me a love for collaborating with other people and to try to define, the scope of what's possible. And so, for me, fast forward to today, it gives me a lot of pleasure when I get to work with my team or with students or people in the industry to try to bite off an opportunity to do cool new stuff. Sometimes it's tricky getting things done, but I feel like if you start with the right people and the right objectives and you're willing to kind of apply some elbow grease, you'd be surprised at what you can accomplish. When I was an undergrad, one of my best friends, the same one that had me end up with Microsoft, we were studying for a final and I was getting very, very frustrated. It was an international relations final and I was complaining about like all the things that were wrong with the world. And he's basically challenged me. He said, well, what are you going to do about it? Nothing, because we got a final tomorrow. What are you going to do the next day? Nothing, because you have another final. This final's week. What are you going to do after that? Probably look for an internship. You're not going to you'll never get around to doing these things that you say are so important. So why would you stress yourself out about it? And I basically have spent the rest of my life trying to prove him wrong, right? Because my attitude is, if you've got a spare 15 minutes, if you've got a spare day, a spare hour, if you can pick up a phone and ask for help, then the things that you want to see happen around you, you can help make them happen, right? The fact that you can't do it by yourself and the fact that you can't do it in 15 minutes is not a reason to just leave it to somebody else to get it done, right? And I think, we talk about, well, how, what does that mean in terms of your professional self? It means that while, especially early in your career, you're only going to be effective if your managers and teammates are in alignment, allowing you to work on the right things. Your attitude should be one of, look, if you guys tell me this is what we're doing, let me help you figure out how we're going to make that work. And I will put myself on the line to make whatever it is that we're doing as successful as possible, right? It's about kind of having a sense of commitment and being committed to the things that you're trying to get done and to keep score, right? To think always about, well, what are we actually trying to accomplish and measuring the results against what you imagined was possible, right? If you do those things and keep a relatively humble attitude and try to actually be respectful around the rest of the squad so they actually like spending time around you, you'd be surprised at how fast and how far you can go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, teams are incredibly strong, especially when they're all on lockstep. And as a young professional coming up, getting aligned and things like that, sounds like definitely take you very far. Appreciate you sharing that. With that in mind, also speaking of like storytelling and things like that, could you maybe share with us some of the powers of being a good storyteller and how they can kind of carry you pretty far professionally, especially maybe in terms of relationship building and sharing the story of a company or an idea to sell it, like things like that?
So that's funny that you bring that up. I would say that so if you guys are ultimately interested in careers in business of any kind, right? You're going to go off and sell wagons, whatever it is. The art of business in terms of making a positive impact is about driving change, positive change. That is to say, I don't know how many of you guys watch Big Bang Theory, but there was an episode where one of the characters explained that there's no point to Raiders of the Lost Ark because ultimately, had Indiana Jones not done anything, the movie would have ended the same way. And it's like, ooh, yeah, that's kind of true. It's still a fun ride, but that is true. You want to be the type of person where, because you were there, something was, something different happened than would have happened otherwise. Well, the thing is, if you're going to change people's behavior, whether it's the consumer's behavior or your teammates' behavior, you have to affect the folks around you on an emotional level. We can, during this conversation, talk about the power of analytics and data and business insights and how you back up your strategy with quantitative information that tells you that what you want to do is the right thing. But at the end of the day, if you walk into the room and just tell somebody 42, 42, that is not going to get them to invest in your idea, right? That's not going to get somebody to buy the product because you say, oh, well, it's 20% more. No, there has to be a story behind it. A story that typically involves a hero, whether that's the consumer, your teammate, the company, whatever, and the journey that they're on and what you're trying to accomplish, right? So that the solution that you're presenting has an emotional connection to where folks are trying to go. Now, there are plenty of great ways to tell stories. There's not just one way. I know that with the kind of onslaught of TEDx's, that a lot of people feel like every presentation has to be a TED Talk. Not true. But you have to think about the art of pitching and presenting. And I would say that with that in mind, for those of you who are kind of getting into the presentation business, I would recommend this book, Presentation Zen, right? Which goes into some of the storytelling around presentation. It's not the only one, but it's a good one. But always be thinking about, how are you making a connection? How are you making sure that other people see the landscape the way you do? And the second thing I would say with respect to storytelling is that you have to be able to be a good listener too. If you want to be somebody who's going to communicate effectively, you have to be the kind of person that can fall in love with other people's problems, right? You're not just listening to figure out, oh, well, how can I benefit? No, it's about genuinely taking on the thing that they're trying to change and to wrestle with that and work with that and engage with that in such a way that when you share your thoughts with that other person, they know that you're doing that as an ally, right? If you can be an authentic ally, if you can kind of consult and be a trusted advisor with the people that you're working with, then you will be able to communicate with folks in a way that actually moves the needle and gets them to change their behavior. That change is where the value lies. And that's how you get promoted and other business opportunities and stuff like that, is when you make that positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I don't know if anyone else is familiar with the book, maybe, of like To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink. That was another one I personally read before my internship in tech sales last summer, which was really helpful. And I guess one of the main ideas from that, as I'm sure you're familiar with, and you kind of just alluded to, pretty much everything in work is some form of selling. Even if you're a lawyer, you're kind of selling to the judge and the jury, right? If you're an engineer with a new idea, you're selling it to your boss. I'm kind of curious, in your current role, where would you say kind of your selling is in terms of like ideas and things like that, or procuring events or getting top-notch professors, students, you name it? Like, how does that look like?
It never stops. So we're always trying to get other people to collaborate with us for the benefit of our students or the benefit of the industry. So a short list of examples, trying to get executives to speak at our events or to come speak directly to students about the experiences they've had in the industry and what people can learn from those experiences. Getting people to collaborate with us on different programs. I mentioned the collaboration with Real Madrid, but we also have a partnership with Howard University where we bring some of their undergraduates out here each summer to participate in our summer institutes. And that was something where we had to kind of get on the same page with the folks at Howard University to figure out, well, what can we do together? And on and on and on and on, right? We're constantly thinking about like how we can do more and make more of an impact through other people. So every day it's about telling stories and persuading people and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I see we got a hand up right here from Anthony
Anthony.
Waller, who's a part of our executive board. Anthony, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for sharing today. Thank you. This has been super helpful so far. Backtracking just a little bit, you were talking about like in the process of storytelling, being able to relate to someone else's problems, being able to listen to their essentially what their cause is. How would you go about, say, trying to convince someone that their cause is in a way your cause, or that you guys should join together when it's not super obvious necessarily?
Don't say it, do it, right? Especially, look, let me tell you something. This is the dirty little secret that is that everybody, I think, will give you the same advice, and only two of you will actually listen. When you are undergrads, you have this tremendous advantage that no one else has. One, people expect that you're there for a reason, right? And so if you show people that you're passionate about something, they will just believe it because your energy is authentic. You can't fake that. And second, you have discretionary time. Everybody else has commitments, they get older, they send their kids to private school or whatever, blah, blah. They got other things they got to do. But for you, if you decide, oh, I'm going to spend 5 hours figuring out how to fill in the blank. I'm going to spend 2 hours a week for the next year going down to the local animal shelter and doing blah, 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 blah. You can do it. A lot of other people can't do it. And so you have the ability to sit and meet with people for coffee, do an informational interview just to find out how people function in their jobs or what's important to them, and then turn around and spend 2 or 3 other hours a week just doing the thing that they said was important. You don't wait for them to say, oh, I'm on your team. He's like, oh, yeah, that's a really interesting problem. Like, how do we use NFTs in the art world? Because you got all these painters who really don't understand how blockchain works and what's going on with NFTs. And, actually, some people are already in that space doing stuff. So you know what? I'm just going to go figure out how it works. And I'm just going to go start helping some artists. I'm not even going to change it. I'm not even going to do it for money. I'm just going to do it to get the expertise and get relationships with a certain subset of artists where they know that I'm doing this for them. I'm not asking for anything because I got the time. I'm going to learn how to do it. And at some future point, having the expertise and being able to point back to say, this is what I accomplished, doesn't even require the artist to do anything for me. That will be enough to get me to the next opportunity. So screw it. I'm not going to wait. I'm just going to do it. Now, I bring that up because, again, people will tell you that. Like, just introduce yourself. Tell folks what you're passionate about. If the person doesn't respond to your email, hit them up again or hit them up on Twitter. Drop into their DMs, whatever you got to do. But be persistent and people will give you some time. And once they give you some time, show your value. Just do things. But I think, a combination of self-esteem and, a little bit of embarrassment, plus the fact that getting started always seems so difficult, very few people actually do it. And because very few people actually do it, there is actually a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I've seen folks who have been really dedicated to just getting to work, find themselves in great positions when they graduate, getting jobs that normally reserved for people with work experience, and then moving up the food chain very quickly because they have folks who are familiar with their work, right? I know that the saying goes, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But that's not true. Particularly in entertainment and sports, it's who knows you and who knows your work. So don't wait for permission to for somebody to invite you, can you come? Like, it would be great if you would come help me. Once you understand that a certain group of folks are being challenged by a thing, just start working on it and come back and say, I was thinking about that problem and this is what I've done. What do you think? Bet you the reaction is going to be very, very different.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Wow. Yeah, that's some really good advice. And that actually kind of like the mention of like blockchain and things like that kind of made me think of one of those questions I think I mentioned earlier before we started the meeting with regards to kind of these NFTs and things like that. I'm not sure if maybe you've seen this yet, but recently just at the University of Georgia, where they just won the national championship, they started this thing called DGDs. It's like doggone dogs or something like that. I can send it to you guys all later. It's they've been picked up in Forbes and everything. What they're doing is they're making these non-fungible tokens like through artwork and things like that while splitting profits with the players. But here's what's getting a lot of people to buy beyond just the art being pretty cool is that by buying into it, it's getting them some very exclusive perks like film review with players, one-on-ones, meet and greets, exclusive tailgates, things like that. I'm kind of curious if you can maybe share with us some of your thoughts on that space in general, maybe where some of the opportunities are, and also a big word too to maybe explain to some other people, and I'm still learning myself, is like Web 3.0 and kind of the metaverse space and things like that. I know that was a mouthful, so we could maybe take one thing at a time. But...
Okay, so NFTs, blockchain when we talk about NFTs, what we're really talking about is using encryption to create unique assets that can be tracked by the commons, right? So that essentially there's a ledger and you always know who owns what, right? We say non-fungible because it can't be faked, right? Now, it can be hacked, and that's a whole separate conversation for another day. But just assume that the whole idea behind NFTs is the ability to create truly unique assets and to prove their uniqueness. So that if you own a thing in virtual space, you and only you own it. And it can be unique or it can be select, like you can create, 3 of a kind or 10 of a kind or 100 of a kind. But, folks will know that unique thing goes with you. And when ownership is transferred, people know how that works. There are a lot of resources that talk about how this all works. Now, what you described with Georgia is really a perfect exemplar of where I think this is useful. That is to say, if you imagine having an NFT of your favorite comic book, let's say, right? So you have a digital version of a comic book, it's unique, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's wonderful. But why wouldn't you just go to, a comic book store and just get the comic, right? Like at a certain point, why wouldn't you want to have the actual artifact, right? Yeah. The moments where NFT technology, to me, and this is just me, where that NFT technology has the most value in an entertainment context is when you're trying to establish a certain kind of relationship with the NFT holder and the entertainment experience. So for example, I would not be terribly interested in an NFT version of a ticket stub from a Meg Thee Stallion concert, right? I know that nowadays, like, people use mobile ticketing and you don't have the pretty tickets anymore like you used to, like the really nicely printed joints. But to be honest, if I wanted a keepsake, then people need to just turn around and make those tickets, because like, what an NFT of the ticket, what does that do? When would I ever even look at it? Well, I've got it in my digital wallet. Right, but the concert's over. Like, I don't understand the value of that. But if you said, oh, go to the Meg Thee Stallion concert and get one of these NFT tickets, and with that, in the future, you're going to have the chance to be admitted into private concerts, a private Q&A, merch drops, like you may have to pay for the merch, but only the folks with the NFTs are able to like buy the merch that comes out 4 times a year or whatever it is. Now there's a relationship. And so the NFT holder essentially has a token, a membership, within an experience that is ongoing. So that possession of the NFT has a specific value. Now, there will be other times when a a truly unique artifact, right, in digital form. And I would think that with the rise of games and virtual reality experiences and stuff like that, you'll see more and more of those things as well. But while I see a lot of hype around kind of virtual artwork, NFTs and other things, those digital artifacts by themselves, in and of themselves, have very, very subjective value, right? And at some future point, you may run into a liquidity problem, because if you don't have enough people who also share the perception of that value, you may not then be able to flip that into something that's going to make money. On the other hand, in the cases where those NFTs on the entertainment side are related to some kind of relationship where it confers status that lots of people want to have, that's a different situation. And I think that has legs. That will be a much more liquid market. There'll be a lot more people who want to be in the special club with, Raphael Sadiq or whoever your favorite artist is, where just kind of digital artifacts might not be as exciting.
Yeah, no doubt. I appreciate that distinction you made about how like the relationship part of it, that makes it more objective, because there's actually like some actual, services, whatever you name it, some exclusive experiences being exchanged, as opposed to, like you said, just the pure art itself. It's a lot more subjective. I got a good message kind of pivoting here on more of a personal level here in the chat, which was regards to, through your career, you've made a lot of different moves. Some of them like, up from New York City out to the West Coast and up to Seattle, back to New York City, then out to LA. And this person's kind of curious, how did you kind of balance like a home life and just a work-life balance in general during these times and all these various transitions? Like, can you kind of walk us through that?
Okay, so first I'm going to tell you that when I was younger, that was not the goal, right? So I don't know how you guys are wired. I'm an old guy right now, right? I'm over 50 now. And so what I'm trying to do regularly is probably not what you're trying to do regularly. I have a 7-year-old at home. I just want to have time to like watch an episode of Supergirl if I can, let it go, let alone like, really kind of fully expressing myself. When I was in my 20s and 30s, I was on a relentless mission to put a dent in the universe, to learn as much as I could, do as much as I could. If I was going to do something, I was going to take it all the way to the nine, right, to the nth degree. So for example, even though I was in a kind of marketing and recruiting role when I was at Microsoft, I learned how to use what's called the Windows Help Compiler, right? So there's a special tool that we used to use, like when you go to a help file and like everything is kind of hyperlinked and all this other stuff. There used to be a way to like bake those into applications back before there was HTML, right? And I just kind of like, folks, we had an idea for a thing we wanted to do on my team, and they were like, well, maybe we could use the Windows Help Compiler to put all this information together and cross-link it and whatever. It's like, okay, I'll figure it out. Right? Like I was not interested in work-life balance. First of all, understand, when I lived in Seattle, I'm from New York City. Now, Seattle has grown and adapted quite a bit since I lived there because of Amazon and the growth of Microsoft and so forth. Let's just say my social options were limited when I was in my early 20s in Seattle. It didn't bother me because I was working 60 to 80 hours a week. That's just the reality. Okay. And traveling a whole lot, especially, during certain parts of the year. When I left and went to grad school and then took the position as a technology director at the school in New York, I wasn't quite on that pace, right? But I was still working a good 60 hours a week. And that first couple of years in New York, I was working in the summers for free. Again, because I had a vision for what I wanted my technology program to be like, and the resources, assets, et cetera, weren't there. So I was just like, I'm gonna do it. Summertime, I have the time, I'm just gonna do it. And eventually, because I did those things really well, people started paying me to do it, right? So I was getting paid to do that extra stuff in the summer, and I was getting paid for my expertise for the things that I invested so much time in, right? Because, from the Windows Help Compiler stuff, I kind of easily figured out how to, code in HTML. I learned a little CSS and JavaScript and stuff like that. And so then when people, this is again, mid 90s and late 90s. So if you were an author or an actor or whatever, and you wanted to get a website done, for those people, it might as well have been like programming the Mars rover. But for me, it was like, oh yeah, I could do that, right? So there was an opportunity to get paid to do these things that I thought was fun and interesting, where I had, expertise that I got from sweat equity. Again, I still was not really interested other than sports, right? The Mets and the Knicks. And I had season tickets to both.
There you go.
Other than that, I was not really interested in, I played on a softball team, a co-ed softball team in Brooklyn. I had significant others, but even then, like the highlight of my week might have been going home on a Friday night and watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And if my significant other wanted to do something other than that, she was on her own. Right. So, I was just on some other stuff. Yeah. Right. I think, what you have to find when we talk about work-life balance is the things that you are passionate about, and make sure that when your max effort is needed for the things that you're passionate about, you are available to exert that max effort at that time. It will not always be the case. So even working 60 hours a week, that's not all the hours in the week. I had time to do other things, pursue other things. But when I was trying to get certain things done, it was like, this is what we're doing. And if it means working, 30 hours in 2 days to get the thing done, that's what we're doing. But there's going to be a time for those other things at some other point, right? And so what you want is not necessarily the difference between serial and parallel, right? You're not necessarily, especially as a young person, looking for work-life balance in parallel, where it's like neat boxes. I'm going to spend 4 hours doing this and 4 hours doing that and 6 hours doing this and 8 hours doing that. It's like, okay, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going hard. I'm going to do blah, 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 blah. Or if you work for a sports team, it might be for the next 6 months while the season is on.
Yeah.
You know where to find me because I'm going to be at the stadium. But then when it's downtime, I'm going to have time to do these other things. And I'm going to tell folks when it's time for me to take a vacation, I'm going to give folks 3 months notice that this is when I'm taking my vacation. Because when I do, I'm going to go see my family and friends or go to some exotic place. And I don't expect you to interrupt me.
Unplug.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's understanding. It's more a question of giving your personal goals and the stakeholders you have in your life how to make sure that you're available to show up and give max efforts to the things that are most important to you in those different times, knowing that you may not actually have balance on a daily or weekly basis.
Gotcha.
Right? That was me. If things have changed since then, more power to you, but that's how I did it.
Sounds like a pretty successful formula, especially seeing as where you're at today. So that's great. RJ, we see your hands up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes. First, Mr. Tucker, thanks for coming to speak to us today. I've had a blast. I know you're a big tech guy and you've been around, the tech industry and media industry, entertainment. So I was wondering how you think the advancement of tech over the years has impacted the way entertainment and like sports and media go about their business compared to like when you were first started your career path.
Okay, so when I first started my career, we didn't have cell phones.
Wow.
When I first started my career, most people still knew where the term copy and paste came from because they actually literally would clip things, paste them in place and copy them, right?
Wow.
People were printing PowerPoint decks onto acetate to kind of onto transparencies and putting them on overhead projectors. When I was, we were using fax machines, pay phones. Almost any entertainment experience was either something you had to consume in person or you required physical media to make it work. A cartridge, a disc, something for you to make that happen, right? And really, starting in the mid-90s to the present, it's just been an explosion of ways that technology has completely transformed the entertainment industry from being able to, consume movies, books, music, etc. Streaming, no media, just a digital copy that you have access to someplace. Being able to consume stuff via a mobile device, right? So, when I was younger, people used to talk about how the automobile was the symbol of kind of American independence and identity, right? Like you were defined by your car, right? And the people would think that they were really cool and different because they would get their mass-produced car in a specific color, right? Like, ooh, my Camaro's banana yellow. I'm so different, right? But that's the same as this today, right? It's the same. People are, oh yeah, man, I'm so unique. Yeah, because I put these apps on my iPhone. But I would say that mobile entertainment, wired stadiums, augmented and virtual reality, streaming, on and on and on and on. Like even things that you don't even notice. So because we use digital media now to for just about everything, you can have shorter ads. Right? There was a time when an ad had to be at least 20 or 30 seconds because you couldn't swap out the ads fast enough for it to be any shorter than that. Now you see 8-second ads. You see dynamically targetable ads. So depending on where you are, you get a different ad. We have satellite radio, which people are like, oh, well, that's going to die out or whatever. Radio generally is going to die out. I don't think that's true. But regardless, you have that, you have podcasts, all kinds of stuff we didn't have. And then the rise of social media, which kind of flattens your ability to communicate with the talent that brings you the entertainment experiences you love, whether that's athletes or celebrities or whatever. Some of the changes are not for the best, right? I feel like what's happened with our news media is tragic. Tragic. One, we've conditioned people to only pay attention to the news that's served up to them, because so much is so available to so many on so many platforms that it's like, oh, well, I expect to see it if it's important, as opposed to feeling like you have to go out and get the information for yourself. And secondly, because, of the kind of combination of the profit motive in news with digital media platforms, we have lost kind of some of the importance as well as the the objectivity of journalism. And so that may be one of the areas where this tech revolution maybe was not for the best. But in every other way, think about video games. If I could go back in time today to the 14-year-old me who was sitting at home, either on his Commodore 64 or on his Odyssey 2, playing some video game, I would smack the taste out of my own mouth, say, dude, learn to code, because the video games, when you're old enough to really enjoy them and have a lot of discretionary money and time, the video games will be so much better. So much better. You have no idea. Now is not the time for this, man. Just learn to code now, right? Because what we had then, I had a handheld football game that was just like a dash that went across the screen.
Like 2-dimensional or something?
Yeah. Oh, dude, I will. In fact, I will send you a link because I think you can still find it. You guys, if you're curious, Google Coleco head-to-head football. Coleco, Coleco, head-to-head football, handheld, and you will see what we were messing with back in the day.
Wow.
Right. So tech has absolutely transformed every aspect of the industry to the point where now when you see these mergers and acquisitions, companies buying other companies, in part, it's because of the experiences that tech has enabled, right? Disney bought Fox because of streaming. Microsoft is trying to buy Activision because of, network mediated gaming, right? So yeah, 100%, man. We live in a strange new world.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of alignment there, with like Microsoft and Activision. I'm sure, having Xbox 360 has made life easier for Activision and vice versa, having a game like Call of Duty, making the 360s fly off the shelf and all that. That's all really cool. Just, I guess, a few more minutes left to be respectful of everyone's time, especially yours. I was kind of curious if you could talk to us about some of the biggest benefits from going to graduate school in general, and maybe like MBAs, and also at a place like UCLA.
So, so there's a lot of different ways to approach graduate school. Okay, so there's a traditional graduate degree, an MA or an MS. Getting mastery over a subject area has its value. And in some cases, certain master's programs are really functionally specific, which I think in your generation can be super helpful, like a master's in business analytics, for example, or a master's of fine arts if you want to be a screenwriter or something like that, where you actually kind of dig down into a particular function and become very familiar with that. I think those things have tremendous value. There's the professional master's degree, like an MBA, right? Where it's a professional credential that has a more general purpose tilt to it. The MBA skill set, especially if you can go to a top program, can prepare you for all kinds of business challenges later in life, and actually even some nonprofit and non-business related functions and disciplines. Although I will say that if you go that route, if you're trying to get a professional degree, I would strongly encourage you to get some work experience before you go that route, because the whole idea of an MBA is that it helps take some of that life and work experience and put it into context so that you see different challenges and opportunities as classes of problems that can be solved using certain kinds of frameworks. And if you just go straight through, I think the kind of your lack of experience in business situations and kind of dealing with people on teams and interpersonally, combined with your lack of experience in terms of people reaching business objectives, is going to make it so that you'll get this academic information that's not going to come alive for you. So I would say that if you're thinking about an MBA, at least 3 years of work experience before you go that route. And then obviously beyond that are the doctoral programs, right? So you've got PhDs, but there are also JDs, MDs, et cetera. And that, really when we talk about getting a doctorate is about going beyond mastery of a subject to getting to a place where you can do research and create new knowledge.
Wow.
Right. And so getting a JD, which is a professional doctorate, or an MD, which is a professional doctorate, is a little bit different, but the time and the rigor it takes to get through those programs is more than you would have in an MBA or an MA or an MS, right? And a PhD is much, much more involved, and really typically is for folks who want to be professional researchers, right? So if, for example, you think down the road that you want to be a professional engineer or a professional analyst and stuff like that, I think a master's degree is more than enough. That in very few cases would you actually use that PhD in a work function, right? There are specific areas like chemical engineering and some kind of, computer science where the PhD will allow you to do other things that the master's degree won't. But generally speaking, industry will pay you for a master's degree. The PhD is not necessarily going to do it for you. Really, a PhD is much more for the academy.
Gotcha. Yeah. Very interesting insights. Really appreciate that. I guess just one or two more quick questions I would
Sure.
have. The first one is, what could you tell us about the Pulse Conference and why we should go? Obviously, a few of us, we've been plugging it. We want to go there, but maybe for those of members and all that who maybe haven't signed up yet, what would you say to them?
So the Pulse Conference is our annual conference. It's our signature event. So it's the one time when we try to make sure that, worlds collide. Because if you think about what my center represents, it's really the business of entertainment broadly. So movies, TV, streaming, music, video games, esports, et cetera, podcasts, social media, right? All of that is kind of in our purview. And so one of the goals of the Pulse Conference is to think about business trends and themes that unite all of those different worlds. And so we'll talk about innovation or diversity and inclusion or blockchain and try to kind of share a perspective that cuts across different parts of the entertainment industry in a way that you won't find in a lot of other places. Also, as the university, we're kind of Switzerland, which means that you don't have to worry about people giving you the doublespeak. For the most part, people want to come and share what they really think. And it's a great opportunity for students to connect with people in industry and to understand kind of what's coming next in the industry. I can't say too much just yet because I don't want to jump the gun on some of the announcements around presenters. But I would say watch this space because I think next week we're going to start announcing some of the people that we've confirmed. And this year it's going to be all right.
Usually pretty impressive from what I've seen. So it sounds like for those of you listening, it sounds like we should jump on it before, you know, space runs out because of some of these announcements coming up, as Jay kind of just alluded to. So that's really sweet. Final question would just be any final takeaways or parting thoughts you'd want to share with us, you know, especially if like you were in our shoes thinking about some immediate type of action items or something that we could start doing as young students and professionals.
So that's a great question. I would say that first, on the academic side, you know, try to figure out what your skill set's going to be upon graduation and make sure you take classes in that area. So saying, for example, that you want to work in movies, well, there are a million different jobs in that space. On the creative side, you have folks that handle cinematography and editing and post-production, development and screenwriting and so on. On the business side, you have everything from accounting to technology integration to, you know, marketing and business analytics and other kinds of functions, right? So thinking about what, you know, you actually want to learn, what skills do you want to bring to the table? What kinds of problems do you want to solve? And then I would say, whether it's, you know, movies, TV, or sports, if you feel like you want to better understand what's going on in the industry, the good news is that here at UCLA, as I say, our center offers courses in the summertime under our summer institutes that you can take that will give you more of a holistic understanding of you know, what those industries are like, and capstone projects that you can work on so you can get a taste of what the work would be like. So that's on the academic side. Think about both kind of what skills you want to bring to the table and what industries you want to learn about. And then I would say that, you know, as I was mentioning before, definitely use this time to get practical experience. So yes, coming to conferences is great. It's a chance to meet people, but trying to get meaningful internships, or even like if you can't get a summer internship, to be able to work on a project during the school year, you know, case competitions, make something, like, you know, figure that out, like just get in, find some buddies and start your own, I don't know, start your own Street Fighter tournament, right? Like, and promote it yourselves and, you know, raise money for charity, something, right? You know, get started. Don't wait for permission to do the things you know you want to do. Just get to it.
Yeah, really like that a lot. And really appreciate it in general for the whole night. It sounds like a lot of great things to keep in mind, and especially, you know, just going for it, start doing stuff. As you exactly just said, don't wait for someone to come around, waiting for them to get you to do it. Just go for it. I really like that all. On behalf of everyone here, thanks so much again, Jay, for speaking with us tonight. The rest of us, we'll go over some final announcements real quick, but just once again, thank you so much. And we look forward to keeping in touch and seeing you at Pulse.
My pleasure. And under the subject of keeping in touch, remember, I'm also an alum. You have my contact information. If you have a question, if you would like to learn more about stuff or whatever, just hit me up. It's all good. We're all Bruins, right? One love, y'all.
Absolutely. Love it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. So real quick, we'll just go over a couple different last things real quick, what our next play is looking like. So we'll actually be having a very recent UCLA undergraduate alum next Wednesday at 6 p.m. His name is Quentin Lepac, and he's currently a partnership coordinator at Major League Baseball. So we're very excited for that. Also, a quick reminder, this Friday is the deadline to shoot in some applications to join our executive board. You can find those on the opportunities tab on our website, or you can feel free to hit that QR code right there. A couple of cool positions right there. I myself kind of started an event coordinator role back in the day. So if you're a younger freshman, sophomore, something like that, you work way up into a leader in a matter of a couple of years. And even if you're on the older side, great for the resume and stuff like that. So we highly encourage you guys to come and join us. And then, as we just mentioned, not going to go through the whole thing, but there's a QR code right there to register for the Pulse conference. That'll be in late February. And as you heard Jay kind of allude to, it looks like they'll be announcing some of their confirmed speakers very soon. And that could mean space becomes very limited, if not gone, come the end of that. So definitely make sure to go and give that a look while you can. And then, as you guys kind of know by now, members with the most points this quarter will get to join us on our field trip to SoFi Stadium at the end of the quarter. And also those who win our case competition. Thank you guys for all signing up. We have over 10 teams competing just for one winner and one runner up. So it should be competitive, and we look forward to seeing what you guys have to think up. And there you go. Quick reminder of what our point system kind of looks like. And yeah, without further ado, thank you guys for staying on an extra couple of minutes. We really appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your week 3. All right.